All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rosalyn Kahn. It's really a pleasure to be with you here today. And let me just go ahead and get started. You see, I remember it was just yesterday when we turned the news on and there was that horrible atrocity in Sunny Point, Connecticut, where all those kids in the school were killed. And it wasn't too long before that, there were people who go into the movies. They wanted to see the Batman release. And they lost their lives. Well, I'm a teacher, and my problem was I had this classroom, and students would just tend to leave, and I needed to keep them in my classroom. And I was like, what can I do with all these horrible things that are happening in the world? How can I get them to stay in this classroom? And so I said, I'm going to go ahead and do these random acts of kindness that maybe if they go out and they do something nice, it'll be able to help keep them around. And so what happened is when my students went out and they did these random acts of kindness, they changed our world. And so today, I want to go ahead and tell you a story. I want to tell you a story of how I originally began with an idea to change my students' minds, and I transformed the world. Today, we are here at the New Horizons, and it's very much a privilege to be here. I was here several months back ago, and it's great to see so many of your wonderful faces because there's so much information we have to share with one another. So today, I'm going to tell you how I began, the people's lives I impacted, and how it touched the larger world. And so what I did, you see, I'm a teacher in the college, and I teach people to do this, to stand up in front of a group and give a speech. And as all of you know, it's really scary to get up and give a speech, and people don't like to get up in front of an audience. And then I teach people who don't speak English. And so what I did is I asked them, I want you to go in the community, I want you to do something nice. Open a door. Go ahead and talk to a senior citizen. Go ahead and help a neighbor carry out the trash. And when you do that, I want you to write it down. And then I want you to come into my class and I want you to tell me what you did. And when they came to tell their stories, there was 4 things that happened. People who were normally shy suddenly were confident because they were telling words that came from their heart. They were telling words of things that they'd experienced individually. And the audience who was normally texting on their cell phone suddenly had a reason to put the phone away and to go ahead and listen. And yet, when they finished giving this speech, if you looked at the people in the audience, it was filled with calm and serenity. But the bigger picture is how it changed our world. And so today I'm going to tell you about one student. His name is Eric. Eric lives out in San Gabriel. He travels about an hour every day just to go to college. And he's a guy's guy. He was on the wrestling team. He's not no girly girl. So when you hear these stories, you're going to be amazed that this guy who's this wrestler and, you know, punching and the fighting and all that thing that they do in wrestling has these stories that touch your heart. So he was on his way to school one day. Decides he's going to go visit his friend at the Starbucks coffee. And he's in a hurry that day, so he buys his coffee and he said, here's a few extra dollars. I want you to pay for the car behind me. Wow. He goes to school, wow. And he comes back the next week later. And this is where the real wow comes in. What happened? A week later, as his buddy Mike says, you'll never guess what happened last week. For 10 minutes, every person who came through that line paid for the person behind them.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I was 150% happier than I'd ever been. He said, so many people give homework assignments that are worth absolutely nothing at all. They're just busy work. Busy work. He said, I know that this homework is really something special And I wonder what's going to happen at the end of 15 weeks when the semester's over. Well, these are the stories that Eric did. And he was so impressed with that story on that day. There's actually research that was written in the New York Times. And the title of the article on March 12, 2013 said, "Does giving help you succeed in life?" And I'm going to tell you in Eric's case, yes, it does. So we move forward in the year. And this time it was St. Patty's Day. That's the day that they have, you got to wear green or you get pinched and stuff like that. Well, his place of business decided they were going to dress up in costumes, kind of like Sadie Hawkins. So he had on the straw hat. He had on the pair of suspenders. He had the red bandana that was out the side. And you could imagine there might have been a piece of straw from his mouth. Well, as he's on his way to work, he sees this senior citizens on the side of the road. And they're like flagging someone down, flagging him down. And the car goes by and by. And another one stops. And he says, well, maybe my membership at Gold's Gym, because I lift weights, maybe there's something I can be able to do. And when he stops by, he says, we've been here for 10 minutes and not one car has gone ahead and stopped. People today are only worried about themselves. And young people, I tell you, I can't believe you even bothered to go ahead and stop and help us out. Well, they say they need help pushing the car to the side of the road. And the father has a heart condition. And the wife has a walker who can hardly move. And he says, let me help you. And so when he pushes the car to the side of the road, they are so besides themselves. They are absolutely ecstatic. And they say, how much money can we give you? Can we treat you to dinner? Can we buy you some clothes? Eric says, it's just a random act of kindness. Another friend told me this research. And the research says every person in this class on the face of humanity and earth itself is hardwired to do something good because it makes us feel good. But you know what's even the better part of that? When you hear what someone else has done and you hear their stories, how many of you would agree by a show of hands that just hearing that one story makes you feel good? Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Now, we're going to move to the third story, and this one is so close to my heart because throughout the whole semester, I had 150 students in 3 different schools going out and doing the random acts of kindness. But there was one group of people that they touched more than anyone else in the whole world, and these are the homeless people. See, Eric was at work that day in an upscale restaurant in Claremont, and he was working as a host at the front desk. And as he was there that day, these people walked in, and oh my God, their clothes were filthy. There was manure caked to the bottom of their shoes. Their clothes were so dirty. You looked at the children, and you could have reported them to the social service. I mean, they had clothes that were tattered, that they were put together with safety pins.
Wow.
And they're going, can you give us some food, please? We're really hungry. And Eric says, this is a nice restaurant. We don't serve the homeless population. And as he says those words, he says, wait, hold on a second here. And he goes to the back of the restaurant. He goes in the kitchen, and he brings out 3 patty melt sandwiches.
Wow.
He brings out 2 shakes for the kids. He brings out a cup of milk for the kids and coffee for the dad. And he says, there's only one problem. If you could please just eat outside, we'd really appreciate it. And they were so overwhelmed with glee and happiness and gratefulness. The manager of the restaurant decided he wanted to put a sign up that said, we now feed the homeless.
Wow.
And so this is the story of a guy named Eric who was on the wrestling team, a man's man with a huge heart,
Wow.
who began by changing a random stranger's way with his coffee. He touched on the senior population of the world, and then he helped our homeless people. And what's amazing is Eric is only one person. I had 149 stories I could share with you. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to wrap up the way that I ended my semester. And when my students didn't have time to share their stories, I read them. And they were so empowering stories, which is why I'm standing here today, which is why I called a week ago and I said, I want to give this speech because my students have changed the world. And when I asked them, what was your favorite story? How did it help you learn English? And what will you remember the most? And so the first story comes from Echo Park. It's a high school I taught at. And in the high school, it's downtown. The students get free lunch and they get free breakfast because they don't have a lot of money. And when one student who told me her favorite story was the fact she told her mother how much she loved her that she'd never in her life said before, this random acts, what her mother had meant to her. And that was her most endearing memory. And then we traveled to Hollywood, to the other college I work at. A lady from Tunisia. She was a single woman. She had the best of fashion. Every day she walked in, she looked like $1 million, I swear. And so when she told her stories that really came from her heart and how these random acts of kindness had so changed her, she stood up and she told everyone in that class, I know that I personally am going to go out and continue to do these random acts of kindness. And I know that everyone in this room will continue beyond this class to go ahead and do these random acts of kindness. It warmed my heart because I just didn't impact people for 6 months. This is going to go ahead and continue. And then there's the peers of Eric, the same school he went to, on the beaches near Santa Monica. And this student said that when she got up and she gave that first speech, it was the first speech she wasn't graded. And she said, if I could see all my classmates getting up there with confidence and going ahead and doing it, I knew that when I stood up and gave that speech, I would be extremely proud and extremely confident in going ahead and giving all the rest of the speeches that I had to give in my class. Extremely confident. And that's pretty amazing because every semester my students say, I wish you would give us more opportunities to give a speech. We just have too many assignments where we need to be graded. And if there was just one more chance that I could give a speech, that would be so incredible. Now, there was this other guy. His name is Martin. Martin is an amazing student. He works for a doctor that does alternative medicine. He's quite a writer, and these are the words that he penned in his own writing. He said when he wrote down these words of these random acts of kindness, it was as if there was a chill that ran down his spine as he simply went ahead and wrote those words. Because he said, it doesn't matter how small the thing is that you do, you never know whose life that you can go ahead and change. It's absolutely amazing the impact we can have and make in the world. Today I began with the horrible atrocities that happened at the beginning of the year. And it brings me great sadness to say, just a week ago, at the college I work at, Santa Monica College, there was a shooter that came to campus, and there were 3 lives that were lost.
Oh my God.
And when I was at the vigil yesterday, they said the one thing that we can do to heal our hearts is to go and do random acts of kindness. You see, I have a friend who's a psychologist, a hypnotherapist, and she told me that if you ever have a bad day and you feel sad and you feel depressed, simply go out and do something nice for someone else. It doesn't have to cost $1 million. It can be simply smiling at someone and brightening their day. I mean, it's pretty amazing how these small random acts of kindness, and yet I know that each and every one of you in this room has your own list of the million things you have to do, the task around the house, the things with the family, and then there's all about the time for me, and sometimes we find there's not enough time. But I want to tell you, it's worth taking the time to count out how lucky you are and how grateful you are for all the good things that happen in your life. And so I want to say to you, you need to take out that time because that time is so truly, really special so you can understand how lucky you are because life is very short.
Yes.
And based on all these tragedies, we never know when it's our time. So I want to invite you to come to my webpage. When you have a bad day, I want you to go to my blog. It's called Stories from My Teachings, with an S, at blogspot.com. And you will see some of the inspiring stories that my students have gone ahead and told. Now, I'd like to go ahead and end by asking you this question. How many of you, when you heard the stories, felt just a little bit better in your heart? Can I see a show of hands? How many of you felt a little bit better? And I bet when you heard these stories, it reminded you of something that you heard someone else had done. Or it reminded you of something that someone had gone ahead and done for you. Or maybe even a random act that you've done. Does anybody have anything that they think of that they can remember?
I did something amazing after school, and I was in a Boy Scout back then, and I was walking along, checking the stores and stuff like that. I had my uniform on then, and I saw this guy, okay, and he ripped off this lady's purse.
Oh, no.
I went after him, and I ran after him like a horse, and I was rushing with the purse, and I got it back from her, and this other guy pickpocketed me, and I said, "Hey, you!" Then I got him, and I got my wallet back, and then I went back, and I gave the purse back to the lady. So that's how kindness I was, and I wanted to change something like that. But the best thing what I done for that lady was the best.
Wow, that's really nice when you go ahead and you help someone else and you're able to rescue what was lost and stolen.
Right.
And what pleased me the most is the beautiful language that you used, that you ran like a bat after a horse. And I thought, that is really amazing, because we always have those choice of the words we want to say, but you put it in the right place. Does anyone else have another story? Penny?
I have been doing so many acts, I can't name them, but the only one that really touched me very much in my entire life. I come from Africa, that's the accent you hear, but I just came back from Africa and I took a medical team. In all the 30 years I've been doing this is the first time I felt so good and I felt like this was the best thing to do. I was in Rwanda with doctors to treat people, and the old lady, like maybe 85, came to me and hugged me and blessed me and said, "This is the first doctor I have ever seen in my life." She's 85 years old. That was the best thing in my life I've ever done. But I have done so many, but that's something that even now when I think about it, I feel chills on my body.
So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart And the words I'd like to say to each and every one of you is gratitude beyond words. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you.